Welcome to another follow-along video with me, Stephen, the creator of iXnote. I'm really excited about this video because Dr. Justin Sung is a really inspiring teacher of learning skills, but I love that he is so focused on mind maps as part of his training environment. Mind maps are so powerful as a way of thinking through ideas. What I like most about this video is that he, despite being a huge proponent of mind mapping, he very much is trying to identify the challenges and what I think are the challenges that actually accelerate the learning. And he puts it very nicely in this video. I'm going to be using FollowAlong, which is the technology built into iXnote. iXnote is essentially a mind mapping tool, but it's for multi-dimensional mind maps, which means that the interface looks a little bit different, but if you squint, it looks like a mind map. And I'll go into a little bit how it's different as we go through the demo, but let's start recording, or let's turn on FollowAlong. There's no actual recording because nothing is saved, but let's turn on the AI, the FollowAlong AI assistant that is going to help build out the context and surface notes as we go along. You'll get the idea as we watch along. So the AI is following along. I'm going to open up the video of Justin talking about mind maps. And this is really, I think, one of his best videos about mind maps and why people struggle with them and why the struggle is good.
Is one of the best learning and thinking skills you can master. But most people who have tried mind mapping haven't found it to be that amazing. And the reason is that there is a problem with mind mapping, a universal problem that nearly everyone runs into. And if you don't know about this problem and you don't expect it and work around it, mind mapping will not be effective. You will feel like it's kind of useful to organize your thoughts, but it's not really that special. But I can tell you with confidence that there are very few other techniques that, when done properly, are as useful as mind mapping. It's allowed me to learn things 3 to 4 times faster than before. It allowed me to graduate medical school with distinction and come first place in my master's after studying for just a few weeks. So what is this problem with mind mapping that stops most people from getting these types of results? The problem is that mind mapping forcibly breaks fluency. And if you want mind mapping to actually work for you, you have to expect this. So here's what this means. Let's say that you're doing some normal non-mind mapping related learning. And so you're just jotting some notes down on a Notion page, sort of summarizing things as you read through a book. And we're just going to call this normal learning, this problem. And you don't expect it and work around it, mind mapping will not be effective. You will feel like it's kind of useful to organize your thoughts, but it's not really that special. But I can tell you with confidence that there are very few other techniques that, when done properly, are as useful as mind mapping. It's allowed me to learn things 3 to 4 times faster than before. It allowed me to graduate medical school with distinction and come first place in my master's after studying for just a few weeks. So what is this problem with mind mapping that stops most people from getting these types of results? The problem is that mind mapping forcibly breaks fluency. And if you want mind mapping to actually work for you, you have to expect this. So here's what this means. Let's say that you're doing some normal non-mind mapping related learning. And so you're just jotting some notes down on a Notion page, sort of summarizing things as you read through a book. And we're just going to call this normal learning. So not using a mind map. And so let's say that we are reading a book. With normal learning, what we're going to do is we're then going to write these notes down into maybe some summarized sentences, a few bullet points. And as we do that, our brain is going to produce these signals. And by signals, I mean feelings that our brain recognizes. So for example, when you read through a new sentence talking about a concept that you've never heard of before, as you write down these notes and you paraphrase it and you summarize it and you write down the bullet points, you are going to get the feeling of understanding. And as you make your way down this page and as you write more and more notes, you are going to get the feeling of progress. And when you do this for a long enough period of time, that initially complicated new material, when you read it again, it's going to feel much more familiar. So we're getting familiarity. And with familiarity, we also feel that it is faster to be able to move through that information. And so I use the word signal because all of these feelings are signaling to your brain that we are learning well. If we're moving through this page and we don't feel like we are understanding it, we're not making good progress, it's not feeling more familiar, and we are not moving any faster, these would be signals that we are not learning well. And the reason I'm talking about this signal thing so much is because our brain is constantly monitoring the techniques and strategies that we're using to make a judgment on whether it's worth continuing or not. And this is
a really important point here. I want to pause it because there's a couple of different things that he's talked about already. The really nice feeling you get when you're in a meeting or you're listening to a lecture or you're reading a book and you're just writing down the things that you're hearing. It can feel a lot like you're making real progress, doing really meaningful note-taking. And that's true if all you want to do is capture enough that you remember the meeting. Also, while we're paused, I'll briefly explain what's going on inside iXnote behind the YouTube video. iXnote is listening along to Chrome and picking up everything that Justin is saying. And it's doing two different things at the same time. It's identifying new note cards, new atomic notes to be created. These are suggestions. And you see here it's suggested that mind mapping is a learning technique that can be highly effective, and familiarity, repeated exposure, progress is felt. So it's capturing these things that are part of the ongoing conversation, and it's building up a set of notes. But at the same time, it's also surfacing. You'll see these ones are new, which means it's just created them, but it's also surfacing progressive summarization. That's a node that I already had in my graph. And because it is closely related to what's being discussed, it was recommended there, which makes it easy for me to link progressive summarization to Justin if I wanted to. I can just click here and just link progressive summarization to Justin. So let's continue with the video.
When we start mind mapping, this breaks. These signals that previously indicate to us that we are becoming more fluent in the information, these fluency signals, mind mapping strips this away. So with mind mapping, we may be starting with that same book or that same piece of reading, but instead of outputting it like this, we're now turning that into keywords that are connected to other keywords, and maybe not even in the same order that's represented on the page. We're taking multiple ideas and we are grouping them together. And the way that we start thinking about the information and what to represent is fundamentally different. With normal non-mind mapping related learning, we are incentivized to focus on how we will express the information accurately and concisely. With mind mapping, we are incentivized to express the relationships and connections between information accurately and concisely. But the problem is taking linear information.
I want to stop here as well, because I think this is one of the key points of mind mapping, is that linear note-taking and outlining is really about capturing information. It's a very efficient way to capture information that can be read again. But mind mapping forces you to capture relationships, and to build those relationships, it forces you to build understanding, which is harder work, right? And this is, I think, one of the reasons why mind mapping is so powerful when done right, and also why I built iXnote around this concept, is that it's the relationships are the hard thing to think through. And it's in building those relationships, you're forced to essentially prove to yourself the understanding of how these things connect. And so as you're working through that, you're doing the hard work of understanding, not doing the easy work of recording information.
almost all information that you consume is going to be linear. Like, for example, you listening to me right now, the words are coming at you one word at a time. You are processing that in a linear fashion. When you read words on a page, that's a linear fashion. And taking linear information and expressing that in a non-linear format, which mind mapping is, takes much more effort and thought than going from linear to just another more condensed form of linear. And one of the reasons that it's so much more effortful and difficult to do this is because you are having to make many more decisions when you're going from linear to linear. Let's say they introduced to the ideas A, B, C, and D in this order. And there's a few paragraphs of text underneath each main concept explaining it. With a normal way of learning, all we have to do is make the decision, how can I cut this paragraph down into bullet points or smaller sentences? But the order of ideas stays the same. The way that the idea is expressed is essentially the same. But with mind mapping, all of these things now change. You now have to make decisions about where to place each of these on the page. Maybe A goes here, and that links to B in this direction, but then B links to C over here because you want to create a nice loop back through D like that, if this is how the information is related to each other. And if A has lots of different points, maybe those points are expressed like this. And maybe those points are related to each other. And maybe one of those points is related to C over here, and C has its own set of points. And maybe one of those is related to another point within B. And so you're now having to make many more decisions about the order of concepts, the relationships between those concepts, the spatial arrangement, literally where you're going to put it on the paper. And on top of that, how do you make it concise, which is the same type of thinking that we were doing up here. So you can see.
So I want to pause here because this is where iXnote thinking and learning and understanding slightly differs from traditional mind mapping because of what he's drawn here, right? As you can see, he's drawn this graph of information where all of these different nodes connect to each other in multiple different ways. The challenge with mind mapping is that you can't really do that. Mind mapping is essentially a two-dimensional tree graph where you have to decide, oh, is A going to be the first node? A is going to be in the center, B is going to connect to it. This is all becoming very difficult to draw in a traditional mind map. But in iXnote, you're just connecting these nodes to each other. Now, one of the things I'd say is we look down this list of Justin's, he's talked about the order that you're going to list these nodes. That's something you don't need to worry about inside of iXnote because iXnote draws itself based on whatever you've selected as the central node. So you never have to worry about the order. You do have to worry about the relationship, which is, in my mind, the most important thinking that you need to do. You don't have to worry about the spatial elements because iXnote draws the graph for you and also orders the graph based on various different priorities and behaviors of how you interact with the graph. But you do also have to be concise because the iXnote interface is designed that you're never looking at one note in isolation. Every note is in context of all of its first degree and second degree nodes. And so to fit a whole bunch of these contextual nodes on the screen at the same time, despite iXnote's relatively compact layout system, you do still need to be concise. So iXnote is built around this idea that working on the relationships and working on being concise are the two most powerful elements of mind mapping, and the order and the spatial worrying is something that we do for you because we don't believe that's such high return on investment. Also, being forced to draw it in 2 dimensions limits your 3-dimensional thinking.
That mind mapping introduces many more aspects of thinking and decision making that linear note taking does not require. And for that reason, when we do mind mapping, the signals, the feelings that we get are very different. Instead of feeling like we are understanding the new material, it often feels like we are getting more confused about the material because there are so many more things, so many more dimensions to think about. Instead of feeling like we're able to make quick progress through this page, learning often starts feeling very recursive or slow because we're making all of these different decisions for each new concept. It's painstakingly slow to figure out where to arrange it on the page. And because you're not necessarily thinking about how something 2 pages later relates to something on the first page, you're not going back and forth. You have to do that with mind mapping to figure out those connections and relationships. And that feeling of familiarity often comes much later. So this is delayed. We stay in this confused state for a longer period of time before we start getting that sense of familiarity. Normal learning triggers many more signals to our brain, telling our brain that we're developing fluency. Mind mapping sends signals to our brain saying that there is a lack of fluency. It forcibly breaks the feeling of fluency. And as a result, it feels like a waste of time. It's unnecessarily complicated. It does help to generally organize thoughts, but it's not really translating into real world performance or better outcomes in any way, or at least.
And so this is really why iXnote is a careful balance of what elements of mind mapping we tried to retain and what elements of mind mapping the system's trying to help you with. So it's helping you with the drawing, it's helping you with the spatial layout, and with FollowAlong, it's also helping you to identify nodes that you already have. In other words, those keywords, because one of the things that's really challenging about mind mapping is because it's normally 2-dimensional on a sheet of paper or on a digital piece of paper, it's a single idea captured from one perspective, so to speak, right? So if we go to this mind map here, so, Justin Sung, if you think of a mind map, Justin is in the middle of the mind map, and there's mind mapping and progressive summarization connected to him. I can maybe connect fluency signals. I can tap on this suggested node and I can say, okay, fluency signals, I may want to edit this node. I can connect it to Justin and I can just save it, right? So now that fluency signals note is connected to Justin and has expanded his context, right? So when I look at Justin, I see fluency signals as part of his context. Now, because this is not a traditional mind map that you have to draw and decide how it's laid out every time, you're able to browse the map, so to speak. And so I could look at Justin Sung and I could say, okay, I understand he's connected to mind mapping. Show me more about the context of mind mapping. So I click on mind mapping and that becomes essentially the central node. Then I can see all the other things connected to mind mapping that I've already connected to that node in past sessions. Things like Tony Buzan, who very much popularized mind mapping, or the brain, which is a really interesting 3-dimensional mind mapping tool, not dissimilar from iXnote. And so I've connected those things already to mind mapping. And so when I look at mind mapping, the context is grown and I can see various different things. The mind mapping is connected to the brain, which is connected to networked thought, right? And so I can browse the context of this in interesting ways, and I'm not constrained by the 2-dimensional limitations of a mind map. But the work that is needed to really understand your context and the material is still required.
That's what it feels like when you don't work through this problem. Because the fact that mind mapping forcibly breaks fluency is also one of its greatest strengths. And it is the core reason why mind mapping is one of the best skills that when you master allows you to think so much faster and so much more clearly. And it all comes down to asking just one crucial question. Does the feeling of fluency translate into performance? Years ago when I was in high school, I used to play tennis very badly. And I remember practicing my serve and practicing it in a way that allowed me to feel more and more comfortable with the technique. And I got to a point where I'd adjusted the way that I was holding the racket and my foot placement and how I was throwing the ball, that made that tennis serve feel way more comfortable than it ever felt before. So excitedly, I went and showed my coach, and my coach told me that I had gotten worse than before. And that is because I had misinterpreted the feeling of comfort as being good technique. What I didn't realize is that there are some things that to do it effectively, you need to do it in a way that at first feels uncomfortable. And so we can take that same perspective and apply it to mind mapping and thinking. When we're reading through material and we're getting these feelings like we're understanding it, we feel like we're making progress, we're flicking through the pages, we're writing more note, that familiarity is building, we feel like we're getting faster. How?
I would say this is really the number one seductive trap of most AI note-taking tools. They have eliminated the final hurdle to you feeling like you're being very productive. They are summarizing the note for you into nice bullet points, into a nice outline. You're not even having to choose the bullets and write the outline. The AI is doing that for you. And so it's really amplifying that feeling of easy success that you're getting from transferring linear information into an outline. And so that's really one of the most dangerous things about AI note-taking tools, the traditional sort of linear to summarizer, summarize this for me, combine these two documents into one for me. It gives you that really fast dopamine hit that you're really making good progress. But anything easy is not building muscle, right? Strapping your Fitbit to your dog so you track a lot of steps. Well, you didn't actually do the steps, so you're not getting fit, right? Your Fitbit thinks you're doing a lot of steps, but you're not. And maybe it makes you feel good in some strange way, but if you're not doing the work, then you're not getting the benefit.
How important are these feelings? Some great researchers out there, we have some really clear answers to this question. And the answer is the feeling of fluency is mostly wrong. In fact, it is so wrong that in the research, this is called the illusion of fluency. And this starts to make sense when you actually look at what it means to be a high performer, to have really good knowledge and great retention and an ability to apply that knowledge at a high level. When you look at what it means to be able to do that and work backwards, things start to make sense. So if you want to have high performing knowledge, what this means is that you need to have a certain level of retention. You need to have high retention. You also need to have a high level of mastery. What this means is that you can understand the information deeply and accurately, but you can also use that information together. So it's not being used only in isolation. You can bring multiple concepts and facts and perspectives together to solve lots of different types of problems.
This is one of the really great parts of mind mapping, and even more so of a graph, right? Because if you've mapped one piece of knowledge from one perspective, and then you map a related piece of knowledge from another perspective, you can imagine two mind maps, but once they interlock and they start overlapping with shared nodes, then all sorts of interesting relationships start to pop up. And this is one of the things that iXnote tries to amplify, is this idea that things have multiple connectors and you can see what connects together. And as you have this graph of interconnected thought, then you start to see some really interesting connections, especially here in the second degree column, of things that you didn't realize were so closely related to the main topic you're looking at. While we're paused here, I just wanted to call out some of the things that FollowAlong has been identifying from my graph. So it's called out desirable difficulty, which was a node I already had. So if I go to Justin Song, I can just connect desirable difficulty to him because that's something that he's talked about. And also it's created a bunch of new node suggestions for me. High retention is essential for applying knowledge effectively. Okay, I'll add that node and I'll connect it to Justin and I'll connect it to mind mapping as well. And I'll save that. So here we've got high retention. It's connected to Justin. It's connected to mind mapping. And so if I go back to mind mapping, I can see, there's more things connected to mind mapping now. Justin is up the top. That's because we've been interacting with that node a lot. So it's essentially bubbled up to the top of the list. And we can see all the things connected to Justin as well through here. Now, this is an example of, it's not a great example, but here's an example of something that's harder to do in a mind map. Not impossible, some of them support it, but not common, is that high retention and Justin are both connected to mind mapping, but they're also both connected to my daily node because they were both created today. And so they're both connected to my daily node. So in this way, I can see what else they have in common. These two nodes have both mind mapping and today in common. And you'll see that more and more in your graph as you work with it. And so the FollowAlong system here, which runs completely on device to help build out these suggestions for you, to make it easier for you to focus on the real work of connecting ideas, not in writing them down, capturing them, and trying to organize them. It really is very focused at leaving the one true piece of work for you, which is building those connections, so that that's where the effort goes.
I like to say that this type of knowledge is integrated. And in the real world, you also need to be able to do this efficiently, basically in a short amount of time. A great example of this is actually looking at retention. One way that you can make sure that you keep high retention on information is that you just constantly repeat it to yourself. Many of you may have used flashcards in school or university. Flashcards work by just essentially using repetition to keep things inside your hippocampus, stopping it from decaying and fading away. But this is ultimately not time efficient, because if you need to repeat everything that you learn every day or every few days or even every couple of weeks, then it doesn't take long for you to be burdened with this debt of hundreds or thousands of things that you constantly need to be repeating. And typically, if that's the situation, and you are actually forgetting things that quickly, it usually means that you're not able to use that information to a high level. What happens inside your brain at a neuroscientific level is that when you learn new information, for example, reading from that book, that information first goes in and is processed by a part of your brain called the hippocampus. And gradually over time, it enters into a longer term, more stable form of storage in somewhere called the neocortex, which is sort of this generic word for lots of different areas of your brain that store memory. It gets actually pretty complicated breaking that down. Now, if information does not move into your neocortex, right? It doesn't get consolidated into your neocortex, then it stays inside the hippocampus. The issue is that knowledge that stays inside your hippocampus tends to fade more quickly. And so if you're keeping everything that you learn just inside the hippocampus, this is the situation where you're just burdened with all these things that you're essentially just trying to memorize through repetition over and over again. When really the hippocampus should be thought of more like a temporary state that gives your brain the chance to move it into the neocortex where it stays a little bit more locked in. So what determines whether something is going to stay in your hippocampus or whether it gets consolidated into the neocortex? The answer is the schema. That new piece of information that's currently in your hippocampus, your brain needs to find a way to make that connect into some kind of network. It has to have a place to belong. It needs to be organized. It can't just be this random piece of information that you're trying to hold on to. It has to fit and belong somewhere because it's connected to other things that you know, other pieces of information. And with
this is really the whole heart of both mind mapping and iXnote. As you can see in the graph, it is all about those connections. And it's by focusing on the singular task of helping you to identify key bits of information in your day and connect them to bits of information that you've collected over your lifetime that are stored in your graph is really the key single piece of work that iXnote is designed to help you do. It's designed to help you do that learning and understanding work by stripping away as much as possible so that only the work of building the connections exists. And then when you're trying to recall your knowledge and you're looking for inspiration and you're looking for, you're looking to understand things as you move through your day, as you go back to your graph and you click on things, this is where the second degree list comes in. Because if I go here and I hear in a conversation someone talk about concept mapping, I could click on concept mapping and I know, okay, well, last time I thought about concept mapping, it was all about mind maps and schema, which is a word I already had in there, and graph views. And, Joseph Novak did some interesting work here. So I get immediately, by clicking on concept map, I get my connected points of reference, my context for that. And then I can also see here in the second degree list that there's all sorts of other interesting things that are 2 steps removed from concept mapping. And this entire context, this map of this, essentially, this is the whole concept, the whole context of concept mapping. It's getting a bit meta here because I'm talking about mind mapping with mind mapping nodes, but I think you get the idea.
When it's able to see how it's all connected together, that is what allows it to move into the neocortex. And this actually creates a positive spiral of efficiency, because as your schema grows and you get more new knowledge added to it, it means that there are more anchor points for you to connect other new knowledge. This is the reason why an expert is able to learn a new fact within their domain very quickly, whereas for a beginner, it may seem completely obscure. It's all about whether the new information fits into some kind of schema. And so once you do fit that information into a schema, then naturally what happens is that your retention is much, much higher. And because it's connected to all these other ideas, that's what creates this integrated knowledge that has deep understanding. And you can use this knowledge and apply it at a high level to all sorts of diverse situations and complicated problems. And because, number one, you have more anchor points to build off of, and number two, you're not having to spend all of your free time just relearning things that you're forgetting every single day, it indirectly massively improves your efficiency. This is the reason why I was able to cut down my studying time by 5 to 10x while doing even better than before. Because just imagine how much time you would save by not forgetting everything. This is the requirement. The knowledge that you're trying to gain, the information that you're learning, to get the results that you're looking for, to get the raise, the promotion, the good exam result, to get all of those things, that depends on how good you are at forming these schemas. Now, I will mention though, learning doesn't always have to feel difficult and slow and effortful. For example, a lot of the things that I'm teaching you right now about learning science and neuroscience, when I initially learned about this years ago, I don't think it was very easy for me to learn that, because I was trawling through, like hundreds of research articles and reading really complicated textbooks that I don't think explain things in a really clear way. And so there are certain concepts that I try to explain in, a few minutes that back then it took me like days or even weeks to really wrap my head around. And in fact, I do encourage you to take that shortcut, the faster path in this instance. If you want to spend the next 10 years of your life reading through research and books and doing trial and error to figure out how to learn and think more effectively, be my guest. But if you don't, and you want to do that like 100 times faster, then you might be interested in joining my free weekly newsletter, where I've taken what I think are the most important insights and the most important practical takeaways that I spent years figuring out, and I've packaged those into 3 to 5 minute emails sent into your inbox for free every week. So if you're interested in learning how to think and learn more efficiently, and you've enjoyed the video so far, you found it insightful, then I think you're going to find the newsletters insightful as well. You can unsubscribe at any time. If you're interested, I'll leave a link in the description below for you to join.
I'll actually end it there. This video has been great. I highly recommend Justin's newsletter as well. Hopefully this did a couple of things. Walked you through, obviously Justin had a whole lot of really good information and insight to share about power of connecting your ideas together. Hopefully at the same time, I was able to show you some of the ways that iXnote is designed to help you with that. And also the way that FollowAlong here in the side panel has been continuously, while we've been listening, while we've been learning, it's been helping us by surfacing notes that are relevant to the conversation and suggesting to us things that might be connected. the point there is that we still have to make the decision as to whether they are. And so although the follow along system here, the AI, is suggesting nodes that might be related, you still have to make the decision of if they are and which of the nodes in the current context they are related to. You also have to review the suggestions that it's making and decide which, if any of them, deserve being added to your graph or schema, as Justin was calling it. And so you have to decide whether it's an important part of your schema formation, so to speak. And you can do that very easily by just clicking on them. And we can see it did surface all kinds of interesting things here. It created a bunch of good suggestions for new nodes that I may want to do. Sometimes I do that in real time while I'm listening, especially when I'm not trying to demo the product. I'll be actively watching the follow along suggestions and I'll be thinking about what connects to what. And other times I'll actually wait till later on in the meeting when the ideas have been discussed in the round more, and I'm able to then think more clearly about how they connect together. So whether you do it in real time during the conversation or whether you do it later is really up to you, but the follow-along system is going to capture that information for you. Do follow Justin. Highly recommend that. He does amazing work. iXnote is available in the App Store for Mac and iOS. As I mentioned briefly in the video, everything is processed on device. All the AI is on device AI, so complete privacy to your notes. All of your notes are actually stored in iCloud using the same system as Apple Notes. So they're available on all your machines, but are shared with no one except yourself. They're in your Apple account. I can't see them. I have no access to them. They are only, the AI is on device. So iXnote is a very private system for you, and none of your thoughts are locked in. You can import and export data very easily. So give iXnote a try if it looks useful. If it doesn't, still go ahead and subscribe to Justin.